Yeah, 7 o'clock. Actually, 7. I'm a little bit late. I had to put up a video or another photo, so that took me a little bit of time to get going. I just got back from a road trip. I'm going to be posting that video up, and I went, as you can see from the thumbnail on this video, I went and picked up 2 new test motors, which is totally awesome. One is a Dodge Slant Six. Fingers crossed. I'm hoping it is a 225. The other one is a Pontiac, an OG Pontiac. A lot of guys remember Pontiacs. Oh, I know that a Pontiac made a 455. Some guys know that it made a 400. OG guys will know that a GTO came with a 389. Some really cool guys will know that they had Super Duty 421s also, and that they had 350s and 326s. Most guys don't know, and I didn't know when I first heard about this motor, that we had a 347 Pontiac. In fact, we had motors before the 347. The very cool thing about the 347, which is one of the motors that I picked up today, is that it was the first year of what? Let's hear in the comments. You guys are taking too long. It was the first year of the tri-power for the Pontiac. Had 3 deuces, 3 2-barrel Rochester 2Gs. And so that was the first year of the tri-power. A lot of guys don't know that. They all think, oh, it's the Pontiac GTO, the 389. That's the tri-power. That's the famous one. Yes, but it's not. It's not the first one. In fact, the other really, really cool thing about the 1957 347 Pontiac, it was the first year for what other than the tri-power? Come on in the comments. Let me know. You guys are taking too long. It was for the factory mechanical fuel injection. We all know about the 283 with the Rochester mechanical fuel injection in the small block Chevy, and it made 283 horsepower for 283 cubic inches. So it was not, it actually wasn't the first one to make 1 horsepower per cubic inch or to be rated at 1 horsepower per cubic inch, but is often given that title. The reality is that the 347 Pontiac with the mechanical fuel injection, which they sold very few of, they only sold between 400 and 500, depending on what numbers you listen to. The 347 Pontiac with the factory fuel injection made more power than the 283, which is not surprising. It's 347 inches. It's not 283 inches. But I got one of those from my good friend Bob, who is a fellow LT1 guy. Let me use the dual plane intake manifold that I ran on all the L99 stuff. He has an LT1. It's an iron-headed LT1. We're going to be doing some stuff with that. We're going to be doing some upgrades on that. One is an iron-headed version from a Caprice. We're going to be putting aluminum heads in it. Probably, I think he bought some Edelbrock heads. We have camshafts. We have intake manifolds. We have all kinds of cool stuff for that. So we will be doing that. But today was awesome because, like I said, we picked up a Slant Six, which is always awesome because the Slant Six, the 300 Ford and the 292 Chevy and the Atlas. In fact, any inline 6-cylinder, like the other one that I want to do that I don't talk about very much is the 4-liter Jeep motor. I'm definitely going to be doing something with that. But all of these are really, really good stuff. So I got those today, and if you look at the first picture that I put up at the thumbnail of this thing, you can see they're both in the back of the truck. I did I'm putting up a video today. I haven't put it up yet. It's all done and edited and ready to go up. I just wasn't able to put it up in time before I wanted to get on live with you guys because I wanted to make an announcement tonight live for you guys that are here tomorrow night. At 5 o'clock my time, and it's 7 o'clock his time, I'm going to be live with Uncle Tony. So if you guys are fans of Uncle Tony, if you're not, you should be because he does cool stuff, lots and lots of Mopar stuff. So I'm going to be live with Uncle Tony, and we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. I'm going to be making an announcement about something that you guys don't know about, and he doesn't know about because I haven't told him about it. I have a number of Mopar projects that I'm working on that I'm going to be doing stuff with, which is very, very cool. And I have some stuff that nobody knows about that I haven't announced yet. And I'm going to be doing some stuff on the Mopar side. So make sure to check out Uncle Tony's tomorrow. Make sure to check out his channel. If you haven't looked at that already, you guys should be subscribers to Uncle Tony because he does cool Mopar stuff. So I got the Slant Six and I was able to talk to him today and said, hey, like I got this motor and I need to do a couple of other things. I have some other Mopar stuff coming up. Let's get together. And he's like, dude, I need you to get on our live deal. So we're going to be doing that tomorrow. So again, make sure to look at Mike Bell Pontiac made the V8s for GMC's pickups. That's where this motor came from. It came from a GMC pickup. It's a 2-barrel 347 with a turbo hydro automatic transmission. And I also have the transmission for that motor. But again, back to Uncle Tony. So make sure to tune in tomorrow live, Uncle Tony. It's going to be 7 o'clock Eastern time and 5, or I think he's in Memphis. and then 5 o'clock California time. So make sure to watch that. It'll be good because he's always great. I mean, he's a good OG like Mopar stuff. So I've got some cool stuff that we're going to talk about. That will be awesome. I've got this Slant Six. I'm not even sure what displacement it is. I don't know if it's a 198 or a 227. I'm thinking it's after talking to Tony, I'm thinking that it's a later, like mid to late 70s 225, which is good. We're going to be doing some cool stuff with that. I'm mostly interested in the induction system on that. The same thing with the 347 Pontiac. There's lots of cool things. If you watch the video that I'm going to post when I was down visiting my buddy Bob, he has lots and lots of 97 Stromberg carburetors because he runs Model A's. And as luck would have it, for that 347 Pontiac, they have an intake manifold that mounts 6 97 Strombergs on it, which, you know, the only thing better than like a single 2-barrel is a 4-barrel, and the only thing better than that is a tri-power, and then 2 4-barrels, and then 6 2-barrels. That's obviously the awesome thing. Fall Fighter, yes, Uncle Tony mentioned that I need to do some dyno stuff on a 318 Mopar, and that's one of the things that I'm going to talk about on his channel. We're going to be doing lots of stuff. Tim says I need to check myself into a sanitarium because I bought a Slant Six. When you see what I'm doing with the Slant Six, I'm doing different things than a lot of other people. I realize what the Slant Six is, and it's not a 2JZ. It's not even a 4200 Atlas motor. It's not any of those things. It is what it is. But the things that I'm going to be doing with it are going to be very, very cool. There are going to be things that Uncle Tony hasn't done, and there are going to be things that Dulcich hasn't done. In fact, there are going to be things that most people haven't done because, you know how I do it. You know how I roll. I'm going to be doing something different. So it'll be cool. And that's what all of this is about is, you know, we can put a cam in it, a ported head and big valves, and, you know, we can go down the road that everyone's traveled, or we can do something different. And that's what I'm going to do. So it'll be very, very cool, both with the 347 and with the Slant Six. But again, make sure to check in tomorrow and watch Uncle Tony's stuff. I'll be on there, and we'll be chatting about all things Mopar. And, you know, it's just a couple of car guys getting together just like this. It's always good. So let's jump right in. I just got back with date night from my lovely wife, Lisa, and everything is good. So let's see how you guys are doing. Twin Turbo V10 would be awesome. Yes, I agree. A Triton V10 is always good. I don't know if I'm going to do the 2-valve or the 3-valve on the Triton V10, but I'm definitely going to do a V10, and I'm definitely going to do my own intake manifold for that. Yes, the Leaning Tower of Power. Uncle Tony's always finding horsepower. That's right. Slant Six live forever, but they eat dipsticks. I know that they have lots of stroke, and Tony and I were talking about that. He was telling me about the different counterweights on the cranks and how much windage they have. And that's something we see a lot of, especially on big blocks, is windage is a big issue with big block Chevys. So if you can make the right kind of oil pan, which I think I'm going to do for the Slant Six, I'm actually going to make an oil pan for the Slant Six and try to demonstrate how much better they are when the crank isn't swinging through the oil, because we know that that's never a good idea, despite the fact we need a little bit of splash oiling. Until Uncle Tony brought up a really good point that the lifters in the cam get splash oiling. I mean, the bearing journals for the camshaft have lubrication, but the lifters do not. So it's splash oiling. So you need some. You just don't need the crank to be buried like, you know, 5 or 6 inches into the oil bath, which that creates a lot of windage. So there's obviously some power there. So it'll be interesting to find out what's going on. Obviously, a 1-barrel not going to get the job done. I'm going to make my own intake manifold. We're going to make it EFI. I'm going to be able to put a 4-barrel on it. I'm going to make adjustable runner lengths. It's going to be all good on the Slant Six side. They eat plastic distributor gears. Yeah, we've tried those carbon fiber gears a lot on a number of different applications, and they haven't lasted as long as we'd like them to. My favorite Slant Six mod is the LS swap. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's the easy way. Texas is in the house. Hopefully you guys are warmer now. I know Texas was having some big problems way back. Admiral, so if I'm choosing between a Lightning M112 and a Cobra M112, anything I should know to make my choice? Or is the difference? Or take a look at the inlet side of both of those blowers. If I remember right, and it's been a while since I've seen a Lightning M112 in the flesh, The Cobra M112 might have a better inlet system going into it, and since the power output is dependent on the airflow in, the Cobra might have a better inlet system, but verify that and make sure. Alex says Smoky unit had a Smokytron just to optimize windage. Very cool reverse dyno, nice. Super Cookie Gaming, do you think you could test the GM V6s? Yes, if I get the bell housing for the 3800, I'm told that other V6s work with that as well, which will mean the 2.8, 3.1, and 3.4. I'm hoping, and I'd like to run those just because I'd like to run a lot of boost on them and blow them up. Those I won't even care about. I'll just put big injectors. We'll put E85. We'll put boost to it. I won't change cams. I won't do any mods to it other than just adding boost. Yeah, smoking choking. The Slant Six definitely. That's why it was alive for so long, is because it lasted. It lasts a long time. It's a good motor, and it's durable, and it works very well. And you know, it's not going to make a million horsepower. It's not. It doesn't have the sex appeal of a Hemi or any of those things, but it's a workhorse, and it's worked really well for an inline 6-cylinder deal. I'm not thinking that we're going to make a million horsepower with it. I'm not even going to try, because it is what it is. But I am going to show some different cool stuff on it. Simple mods. Why didn't Chevy continue with the 32 valve double overhead cam V8 after the original LT5? The reason that they didn't continue with that is they already had another motor that made that power output with all the complexity, without the complexity of the double overhead cam deal. I mean, the LS motor already made that power. The LS6 motor made LT5 power, 1990s LT5 power, but with a much easier package to produce. Ooh, a 91 W40. I like those. But it does have the W41 engine. That's an old Quad 4. I love that. I saw one of those at the wrecking yard. I wish I could have had the whole car. Washington's in the house. Nice. I've been there. I've raced when we were running US touring car. I brought my Del Sol up and we won at Portland, and that was it was a long drive for us, but it was a worthwhile deal, and I loved racing up in Portland. It was awesome. Mike says a Slant Six with a 4-barrel intake and a big Carter Edelbrock can make more power than you'd expect. I've seen mods done on them. I've seen them get up near 100, or 1 horsepower per cubic inch, let's say on a 225. It took a lot of modifications, head porting and bigger valves and a different intake and camshaft. And obviously they went through the bottom end and got the piston up and added compression and stuff. And so it took a little bit of work, but it was okay. I'm not trying to, like I said, I'm not trying to make a million horsepower with it. And I don't know about, I'm a little worried, not about the headsets. I'm sure somebody has headsets or head bolts for those, but I'm a little worried about the availability of head gaskets for it. So like porting the heck out of the head. I've already talked to Dulcich many times about the Slant Six, and he's ruined a number of Slant Six heads trying to port them in the same spot and going through, basically porting through to air or water, and it didn't work out very well. And he's really good at what he does. He knows a lot about the Slant Six stuff. So I'm not worried about trying to maximize the Slant Six. I don't want to make 400 NA horsepower out of a Slant Six, out of a 225, and I don't want to make a million horsepower out of boost. But I do want to show people what happens when all of the runner lengths are even, and then what happens when they're different lengths, and what happens when we run a carburetor, what happens when we run the EFI. And the reason that I want to run EFI on the Slant Six is so that we can safely run boost, because I think that's one of the big problems. And Dulcich had that problem when he ran the Slant Six with a Powerdyne with a Torque Storm supercharger, and they have a kit for it, which is awesome, and it works good. But when you're blowing through something, even if you're blowing through a throttle body fuel injection, if you look at the intake manifold on a Slant Six, the 2 outer runners are basically the same length. The next 2 runners are basically the same length, and then the last 2 are short. The problem is they're all designed to make power, to optimize power production And so there's almost no way, I think it would be very hard to get even fuel distribution. And then if you do, they're designed to make power at different RPMs. Now, here's the thing, and a lot of guys don't realize it. A lot of guys think, okay, that's a terrible thing. But what having different runner length does is, since they're optimized to make power at different RPM ranges, you can kind of adjust the torque curve a little bit by doing that, by having two runners that make it down low, and then two that make it in the middle, and then two that make it at the top because they're short. You can kind of broaden the power curve of the combination if you do it right. The thing is, it's very difficult to do that with a carburetor. At least I think that it is. So let me know what you guys think. But I think having all the runners even, and then if I can make them really, really long and then really, really short, we can kind of show what they do, which will be very cool. Will you ever test a Chrysler 4.7 V8? That would be low on the list. Is it possible to stroke the Slant Six? I think it has a lot of stroke already. The Slant Six was used all over the world, and it's a, like I said, it's a very versatile engine, and it's a workhorse. You know, it works good. A Barra engine is cool. Lots of guys have done lots of really, really big power with the Barra stuff. Nova plans. The plans for the Nova are to put more and more engines in it. Mostly, I want to put 6 cylinders in the Nova. Pre-built is trying to find flat tappet information or test on small block Chevy in a truck, maximum 5,500 RPM. It's going to get a TPDI intake. You want something that's going to be like a 206, 212 or a 212, 218, somewhere in that range of cam duration. And it's going to be low lift. It's going to be low 500s all the way down to 470 or 480 lift. Probably with a tune port, more than likely it's going to be 112 or 113 degree lobe separation angle, and that should work pretty well on that combination. The tune board is going to kind of dictate where that motor makes power. Don't put a lot of camshaft in it. Like I said, a 206 or 208 or 210 on the intake side, and you should be fine. Super Cooking Gaming, I've heard that the aluminum Slant Six, they did make aluminum block versions of the Slant Six, although there's not a lot of them out there. Tim says that there's a Gen 2 LT5 that had Siamese ports and a better intake, 475 SAE. What was it ever offered in? It was never offered in a factory ZR1 Corvette. They had 385 and 405 horse versions, but was that a marine motor or something? Let me know, Tim, if you know what that is. I've never Thomas, I've never tested a cross-flow head for the inline 6-cylinder, and I don't know about the aftermarket head for the Slant Six. So maybe Australian guys might know about that. Steve, I've never tried any electric boost controllers, not eBay stuff. We have a TC1. We've also run other controllers, you know, off of the Holly or off of an AEM or those kinds of things, but I've never tried one. And we've also run, I think, the one from TurboSmart, which works very well, but I've never tried any of the low buck ones. We've always done the low buck manual ones. And when I say low buck, I don't even mean eBay low buck. I mean, I went to the fish store, we call them aquarium valves, and just do the bleed, and that works fine if you want to go really low buck, and that was like OG stuff way back in the day. Rex, would you prefer a centrifugal positive displacement blower for an LS1 or 6 vet? Would you use a 4-inch crank if you're playing on forged internals? That's all up to you. It depends on how much power you want. There's lots of blower kits like a Magnuson or a Kenny Bell or a Whipple All of those will make good power. They'll make really good torque. They'll be real responsive. You'll be able to spin the tires. Depends on what you want to do. If you want more power, NA, ported heads, cam, you can also do displacement. That helps as well. Again, it just depends on your needs. Manto Black, big problem with the Slant Six is that it only has 4 main bearings instead of 7. We're not going to run the thing very high, so we're not going to have a bunch of crank distortion, I don't think. Is the Nova going to get a VQ? Now, see, that would be kind of awesome. That would be way on a different scale. In the AMC 232 stuff, I know if I do an AMC, it's probably going to be more the normal stuff, like a 360 or a 401 would be kind of cool. A 390 would also be cool. I got to be there when Westech was testing a 401, and there's even a dual quad 401, which is awesome. Yeah, Uncle Sashi, Uncle Tony's did some good stuff on the Slant Six. He's built a few of these Dodge things. Richard, when you get the 225, I already have it. It's in the back of the truck. It's already here at my house. It ran before I did those 3 things. It wouldn't take much to do that. I don't know what 3 things you're talking about. Maybe you mentioned those earlier. Caleb wants to know where the idea that inline sixes are better for torque than other piston arrangements. The configuration I don't think determines that. The displacement determines that, and then other things like head flow and cam timing and intake manifold and stuff. I don't think the configuration determines that. Would love to see an old Offenhauser 4-cylinder. Now that would be awesome. A big turbo Offie from like an Indy car would be very awesome. That'd be hard to do though. Yeah, Mike, Aussie Speed has intakes for the Slant Six. I know that they do, and I've seen them, and guys have tested those. And what I want to do is different. Their intake manifolds are still the same problem. They have shorter runners and then longer and then longer. Theirs is stretched out farther, and they have more runner length, which I think is a good idea, especially at the RPM that they're running them in the mild cam timing that they have. But I don't think that they need to be different lengths. I think that they should all be the same length. Yes, Chad, I've owned several BMW 6-cylinders, and I've loved every one of them. We've had several 330s, and I think that they're great motors. BMW does things very, very well. The M series stuff is awesome. All of the BMW motors that we had were great. I would love to do. I think that I've seen lots of guys turbocharge their stuff, and it works really well. They're good motors. I mean, they know what they're doing. Yeah, Tim, I know they never offered a 475 version. I've actually done a lot of testing with the LT5. We did ported heads, we did cams, we did headers, we did nitrous. We did all kinds of stuff with those way back in the day. We had a guy that was running 9s with one of them, and it made plenty of power. It was a good motor. It had plenty of potential. It's just that compared to, like, if you look at that motor and how much power it was making compared to a cammed LS3, it's just not, you're talking about older technology versus newer technology. And it's the same thing when you compare a 302 5-liter Ford from 1989 to a 5-liter Coyote. It's just not the same. It's just not the same thing. And even though the LT5 was, obviously way ahead in technology, it just didn't make the power that a modern motor makes. Lane, does a turbo get worse gas mileage with a turbo? That's usually a function of the way that you drive. Under cruise, probably not. You probably can get it to get the same mileage as it did when it was NA. Johnny, we have not done the Vortec 4200 yet. We're still working on it. That's coming. S14. I plan on doing a sloppy radio show. Matt asked me if I wanted to be on it, and I told him yes. So I'm sure it's just a matter of scheduling it, unless he's forgot about me and there's just no love. The aluminum Slant Six was actually a production piece, and it was an option that they offered, that Dodge offered, and it was very inexpensive. From what I read, it was less than the cost of an AM radio, is the stuff that I read. So it was very inexpensive, but not a lot of guys stepped up to that because it didn't really offer any more performance. It just added less weight, obviously, and they also had problems with head gasket sealing on the aluminum heads, or on the aluminum blocks, I should say. Any more 351 stuff coming? Yeah, I want to compare the 351 Windsor to the 360 Magnum Dodge, and then the 350 Vortec Chevy. Thermal gaskets. I've never tried the thermal gaskets. Engine Man wants to know if there's any benefits of swapping a small block Chevy to coil on plug. No, we haven't seen that, especially for any kind of mild application. Where you run into that possibility, and I haven't explored that yet, because since we've made over 1,000 horsepower with a conventional distributor and a single plug, is you start working into a problem with the rise time of a single coil, and that it won't continue to be able to provide the spark for 8 plugs at high RPM, and it doesn't have enough spark energy under really, really high boosts and stuff at high RPM. That combination can become tricky. That's where coil on plug stuff, like an LS conversion kind of thing, can show benefits. But like I said, we've made so much power with a conventional distributor and a single coil that, I don't know where that number is. Israel wants to know what I think of the early 3.1 Grand Prix. I think it was awesome. I got to do some stuff with one of those on the chassis. I know way back we did some twin dual cam stuff, and then we did the 3.1 Turbo Grand Prix also. But we did the normal stuff. You just put exhaust on it, you raise the boost, and we were kind of limited in what we were doing back then because we weren't able to go in and actually change the computer back in the day. Aaron, let's go. $5 for the Magnums. All right. Luke wants to know if I ever thought of doing Volvo T5 stuff. I really like the Volvo stuff. I haven't done any, but I remember when I was out the Silver State, when they first introduced the T5R stuff, the turbo stuff, the guys from Volvo, the factory guys, brought a couple of those cars out and ran them in the Silver State to find out if they would run at that speed for that length of time with those new turbo motors, and they did very well. And I think that they're kind of cool. I haven't played with Volvos very much, but I do like them. Yeah, yes, everyone buy a 4200 Trailblazer before Richard does his test, because then there's going to be a Richard tax on all of that stuff. Tyler wants to know, what age did you decide engines and testing you would make a living, and did you have a backup plan? Actually, this was my backup plan. I went to school for advertising. I got a degree in advertising. I got offered a number of jobs from my professors because I did very well in school, and I had that kind of creative mind that they wanted for advertising, coming up with clever schemes and catchphrases and all that stuff. I won some awards back in the day in some advertising contests where we had to develop campaigns, and so I did very well, except I decided to go down the lucrative avenue of automotive journalism, which was not a good idea. Bug. I've never built a 400 Super Commando engine, but I know that the guys at West Tech and Dulcich certainly has run a 400 before. I think he put one of those together for Engine Masters. Yeah, Dan, you can run a twin turbo on a Slant 6 without any problem. And you just have to run 2 small turbos because it's not a very powerful motor to begin with. Wow, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Johnny wants to know, are turbochargers better than superchargers? One of them doesn't have to be better. What you need to stop thinking about is what is the best thing? What is the best cam? What is the best head? What is the best form of forced induction? Figure out what you want to do and then figure out what thing you need to make that happen. So turbochargers and superchargers do different things. A positive displacement supercharger does different things than a turbo does. A centrifugal supercharger does different things than a turbo does. And then the 2 superchargers types do different things than they do, you know, amongst each other. But just figure out what you want to happen. And then there are ways to make that happen with any of those things. William wants to see a turbo 400M or a 351M because I know they never made a 400M, but I will forever and now and forever and way back when I first did that that first test, I will always call the 400 a 400M because I'll always call 351M a 351M, and the 351M and the 400M are in the same engine family, so they're all M's. I haven't talked about the 3800 testing because we haven't got the motor running yet. Yes, I do plan on getting my Mustang back out on the road. Right now, it is in New Mexico. I need to go pick it up. Chris wants to know if I've done any testing with compressed natural gas. I have not. I've not done CNG stuff. But it is really high compression, and you can, I've seen guys make power with it. Durham wants to know about a 483 800 piston 6.3 rod, 7875 G version G2 generation 2, a V-band and a 0.96 housing. That will work fine. $400M, tall as that Cleveland. That's what I always called the 400M a stroker Cleveland motor, because whenever we did Windsors, everybody wanted a 351. Everyone wanted to do a 408 because that was the stroker version. But a 400M was already that if you put Cleveland heads on it, which it already had. It had 2V Cleveland heads. So if you put 4V Cleveland heads on it and a good cam, they make good power. They just have a really tall like deck height and really long rods. But you know, we never revved them more than 6,500. I don't think when we were doing this stuff. And you know, a 400-inch 4V Cleveland is a pretty stout piece. Catch me up. I just joined. Okay, make sure to watch Uncle Tony tomorrow night, 7 o'clock this time and 5 o'clock his time because he's back in Nashville. So make sure to watch. I'm going to be on Uncle Tony. We're going to be talking about a bunch of Mopar things. Team Shinoda, did you ever get the Chevy V6 bell housing? I was told that the guys down at Anaheim Gear, which I've done stuff with in the past, they actually did the gear changes and stuff and rebuilds for my Hondas when we were road racing. They told me that they had one, so I'm hoping I can go down and get it. Otherwise, I got to get one from somewhere else. What are my thoughts on a 390 FE? I like them, and I would like to build one. Rob wants to know how I feel about blueprint heads. I've run them on a number of things. On the 400-inch motor that Chad had, it was a 400-inch power adder long block combination that Blueprint has. They offered. We put a camshaft in it. We actually ended up changing those heads because we put trick flow heads on it. But even before that, Chad made a ton of runs and put 20 or 30,000 miles on it. Running nitrous at every event with his wife, who has now passed away, Daphne, and we miss her great because she was awesome. But she was the one driving it, and he beat the heck out of that thing. and then we put the other heads on, and we ran it at 1,000 horsepower for the fastest car TV show. And so every one that I've run, all the blueprint stuff has worked fairly well. I ran their big block stuff. We ran that at like 1,300. We ran nitrous on it. We ran turbos on it, ran blowers on it. And all of that stuff for us has worked pretty well. I'm going to scroll back here a little bit. Engine Man wants to know about the powertrain on the Mustang. It has no powertrain in it right now. What I'm going to do is to put it back on the road first, it's got to have stock stuff put back in it. And that's what I'm going to do. That car might end up being for my son, and because he's now getting into the car age. So that is a really cool car, and it would be cool to see him drive that. But he can have, you know, he's obviously going to pick that just like I did when I was growing up. Although, and here's a quick story. My first car was a 1970 split bumper Rally Sport Camaro. It was a base motor, so it had a 2-barrel. So it was not particularly sporty, but I love that car. It was lime green with a white top, and I eventually changed that. I used the vinyl dye for the top and made it black. And then we ended up painting the car red, and I put black interior because it had green interior in it, and eventually put a 4-barrel and other stuff on it. And while everyone was jacking up their cars with the air shocks, my car originally came with air shocks. I put conies on mine. We put WS6 springs on it, and, you know, conies and sway bars and all that stuff, because I wanted the car to handle. I cared more about road racing than while the other guys were drag racing. And I thought it was awesome. And my first car kind of happened by accident. I was outside playing, doing something, you know, and I remember my dad came out and said, "Hey, do you want to go with me? I'm going to look at a car." I'm like, "Not really. I'm a kid. I want to play." And then my older brother walked up to me and said, "You need to go with him, because that car that he's looking at is probably going to be your car." And then I went and looked, and it was a very cool Rally Sport split bumper Camaro. A-Rex, is there any truth to a centrifugal blower being better option for top end runs and standing mile runs over positive displacement? That's going to depend. Here are the things that you need to think about. On a top speed run, if you're talking about top speed like Bonneville, that's a different thing. If you're talking about a standing mile or a standing half mile is actually an acceleration contest, just like a quarter mile is. So to get up to whatever top speed is, you have to accelerate up to that speed. So average power production is still very important. So if one kind of supercharger or one combination of a supercharger and a motor makes more average power, you will get up to a higher top speed. A centrifugal blower typically has a greater efficiency at any given boost level, meaning that if you can compare that one at 10 pounds versus certainly a roots blower at 10 pounds, and then kind of a centrifugal at 10 pounds, the centrifugal blower or a twin screw at 10 pounds, the centrifugal blower will typically make more power, not a lot. If you compare a turbo to any of those, the turbo will make more power at that boost level because it doesn't have any of the parasitic loss associated with driving the blower. And this becomes really important at very high power levels, because the amount of power that it takes for a supercharger to make, let's say, 1,000 horsepower, it might have 200 horsepower or more worth of drive loss. The turbo doesn't have that. So it's going to make that much more power at that boost level. You will see that power, and you won't see that because it's being absorbed basically by the drive losses on any of the blowers. But as I said, the problem with a centrifugal blower is it has a rising boost curve, you know, almost no matter what you do, unless you do an artificial thing with a bypass valve or a wastegate and artificially spin it up faster. You can do some of that stuff. But it doesn't have as much average power as a good twin screw does. I would probably pick that over most conventional root stuff, although a 2650 Kong blower in a root style in the TVS, which is kind of a hybrid, also is a pretty good option. What's the most power you've had on a naturally aspirated LS? The most I've ever made is 820 or 830, I think, but it was a big motor. It was a 495 motor. I'm going to do a Patreon. We just haven't put it up yet. Twin 62 VS Racing turbos on a 5.3 for 700 horsepower. I think I don't think you need two of those. For 700 horsepower, a single, they have a single turbo that would work for you, or two maybe slightly smaller than that. The LSX DR head definitely has lots and lots of potential. And I've seen really good things with the Frankenstein stuff as well. I haven't tested any of them because I haven't put together any kind of motors that would require that kind of cylinder head, because let's face it, that head needs a lot of motor, as we saw in the LS3 head test and the LS7 head test, that going up from a really good ported version of the stock head, either an LS3 or an LS7, you have to have a lot of motor to need the more head. And when guys have even more head, you have to have even more motor. So you're talking about a head that will support, like a head that will support NA power of 800, 900, or 1,000 horsepower. So that's a lot of naturally aspirated power. Yes, we're going to do shirts as well. Alicia, there's no difference between singles or twins. Usually that's kind of a packaging thing. You can get them to do the same thing. Singles sometimes are easier to hook up the intercooler and stuff. And obviously twins, you've got to merge them together if you're going to a single core, or you go into two cores like we do with the Big Bang stuff, and then you have a single outlet. So you have to work out all of that stuff, and then you have to fit all of that stuff. So a lot of times it's just fitment. There's no gain of a single versus a twin, or a twin versus a single. Usually that's fitment, that you can make the turbos do whatever you want the turbos to do. I've not worked on a Y block, like a 312 or something like that. I've never done any work on those. Can you add boost to a 5.7 TBI? Yeah, the problem you have with that, I mean, back in the day, the Vortec guys were doing blower kits for them and Paxton and stuff. The problem with those is they had to add additional ejectors, because there just isn't a way to get enough fuel to the TBI, because there's a limit to how much fuel you can flow, even if you put the big block throttle body and the throttle and the injectors in that. There just isn't enough fuel to get good like gains. Alicia, no, two small ones and won't necessarily spool faster. You can get the same spool rate if you size the turbo, whether it's a single or twins. If you want a Buick alloy V8, look for a Triumph TR7. I think you mean, Tim, I think you mean TR8. The TR7 was actually a 4-cylinder. Yeah, Durham, definitely do a video of it if you're putting a 4.8 in a van and you're going to do the things you're talking about. We all want to see a video of it. We all want to see cool stuff. Chad wants to know whatever happened with the budget camshaft thing. I might have some development cams come later, but I'm not going to do that. Is there any instance when a belt-driven centrifugal supercharger would be better than a turbo? Well, you don't have to do the heat and the packaging of the turbo stuff. So a lot of guys like the centrifugal blower. The centrifugal blower is easier to get emission certified than aftermarket turbo stuff is. So there's benefits to all of that, but not from a power standpoint. If you ran 10 pounds with both of them, the blower, whatever it is, you'd have to subtract the parasitic loss associated with driving that blower, which the turbo doesn't have. So the turbo will always make more power. Aaron, the guy that I picked up the 2 motors that I got today, the Slant Six and the Pontiac, races flatheads, and he has several that he will allow me to run dyno testing on. So that will be very cool because I've never run a flathead. Yeah, Brian, I like the 348s and the 409s. I think that those are awesome. Ken, any flat plane LS stuff? No, I'm going to put that in the most common question. Nobody wants flat plane cranks. Everybody hates flat plane cranks. Pierre, we are going to talk about the 318. Tony and I had long discussions on the 318. That's the motor that he was pushing that he wants me to do. Jeff, come out to Bonneville. I have multiple records out at Bonneville, so I'm pretty familiar with it. Eric wants to know if the scavenging effect from long tubes still work. I think it does. I haven't run a back-to-back test to show you that that's the case. I haven't run a test to show you long tube headers versus stock exhaust manifolds on a turbo application, but I probably should. I tried to do that with a Honda way back, and it didn't really work out. I'm not going to do a 318 poly. I'm going to do a 318 LA if I do a 318. I'm definitely going to do the Magnum stuff. So I might do a 5.2 or a 318 Magnum and also a 360 Magnum. 390 Cadillac, probably not. The 500 was enough. The 500 and the 472 are probably the most popular Cadillacs. And then the other ones are less so. Grim, I've never done any testing on a North Star, although I think I should because there were a lot of them in the wrecking yard and a lot of people have asked about them. Yeah, go random. We talked earlier about if I had the bell housing, the 3800 works out, then the 2.8 and the 3.4 and the 3.1 should all bolt up, and we'll definitely do a destruction test on one of those, one or more of those. Yeah, Tim, I agree. A flat plane crank is just nonsense. Look at all the time and money that Ford spent. I mean, they almost had to delay their Mustang with the flat plane crankhead. They had to delay the introduction of that because Ford, the engineers at Ford, with all of their development time and money, had curing the vibration issues with a flat plane crank. It sounds cool, but it's just not. It's not beneficial. I honestly don't think that the Voodoo motor, the 5.2 Voodoo motor, is going to make any more power than a 5.2 regular Coyote if we had the same displacement. I don't think the flat plank crank gets you anything other than vibration, and it really sounds cool on the exhaust. Julius, I don't know if Tri-Wiser 4-in-1s on a turbo deal would make a difference. Yeah, Aaron, I like the idea of the Magnum stuff. As a matter of fact, when I was talking to Uncle Tony, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. He wants to do more Magnum stuff because when I go to the wrecking yard, I see lots and lots and lots of Magnums, and I don't see a lot of LA stuff. I know he does because that's his deal. But if you go to a wrecking yard, you're not going to find a lot of like LA motors. You will see lots of Magnums. I see a ton of those. The Osman, is the LS3 the same as the LSXR intake? Yeah, if you compare a fast LSXR or an LSXR-T intake manifold, either one of those for the rec port head, there's really no gain for that manifold over a factory LS3. On the cathedral side, there definitely is. A fast manifold is by far the best manifold up to 6,500 or 7,000 RPM. It makes the most average power. It makes a lot more than a Trailblazer SS and more than the truck and more than the LS2 or LS6 or any of those. But on the LS3 side, I would never buy a fast manifold. Oh, if I had a factory LS3 manifold, I would just run the factory LS3 manifold. Durham, I was mentioning earlier, I don't know if you were here, that I already went out for date night with my wife. So yes, there was. H2O, we're gonna do boost on the Slant Six. Not a lot, but we have to do some. I mean, have you read what they do with crank layouts in the MotoGP engines? I have. That's good technology. If you really are like a crazy tech guy, some of the stuff is even beyond me, and I really like the technology. But if you read Race Car Engineering, if that's might not even be available anymore. I don't remember. I haven't looked at it for so long. But the Race Car Engineering stuff, the tech level was like, was turned up to 11, and they have a lot of good stuff. And the MotoGP stuff was really cool. I like the Big Bang, which is where I got the name from. I didn't even get it from the TV show, which I watched, but the Big Bang Honda motorcycle engines, which are really cool, oval pistons and all kinds of crazy stuff. Antonio, will you do any more testing on a Gen 357 Hemi? Yeah, I have a Gen 357 Hemi, and I'm about to put Edelbrock heads in it and an Edelbrock intake, and then we will probably do maybe more boost on that. I wouldn't go with a blower cam on that. I would go with an NA cam because I think you'll be much happier. Steve, what's it? Steve 2021. $2 Chuck. The Ozman, what's up? $14.99. I'm liking it. I'm liking you more and more. They did continue with the LT5. It's called the North Star. That's a pretty big gap between that and the North Star. The Iron Duke. I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for an Iron Duke. I kind of would like to do one of those. Although the problem with the Iron Duke, I think, yeah, that'd be cool to do an Iron Duke. And then I think, it'd be really cool is to just do a quad 4. That would be way better. Tyler wants to know what the sketchiest thing that ever happened when I was racing. I have 2 examples, and I'll tell you both of them. They're both really, really scary every time I think about it. One, I was racing at the Long Beach Grand Prix. I was in the Bridgestone Supercar Series. We had a supercharged Mustang, and I came around the corner behind one of the Lotuses. It was Doc Bundy or Paul Newman or Annie Pilgrim, one of the guys in a Lotus, and we came onto the front straightaway, and it was the last lap of the race. And the guys from the inside of the track are going like this. Okay, go to that side of the track. The guys on the outside are going like this, go to the inside of the track. So I had no idea what they meant. So we're, I'm right behind the guy. So we're racing to the finish line. I'm seeing if I can pass him. So we're going as fast as we can around Shoreline Drive, which was, I don't know, 130 or 140 miles an hour. But what they were trying to tell us was that one of the Dowtech Nissans had just spilled its guts all over the fastest part of the course. So it had laid down everything. It had laid down oil and coolant and power steering and every sort of fluid that it had right in the middle of the track. So we came racing around the track, and I thought, well, they're waving me to one side, they're waving me to the other side. I'm just going to stay in the middle. So me and the Lotus kind of stayed in the middle, right where all the stuff was. And we were going, like I said, 140 or 150 miles an hour. And so we came around into this stuff. And there was nothing I could do. It was like being on ice. I didn't have any, all of a sudden I was a passenger. I was not in control of the car. So I thought, okay, look, the front's not grabbing, the back's not grabbing, no amount of throttle or brake. I don't want to get on the brakes. Nothing is happening. So all I did was almost let go of the wheel and just held on very loosely. And everybody along the pit row, they're all like, oh my God, this is going to be bad. They all knew that there was a crash that was going to happen. And I thought, oh, I'm just hoping that somewhere, somehow, some way, because this was also a very, very high speed turn. We weren't going straight. So the car was, once we hit this stuff, was crabbing a little bit sideways. So I thought, okay, this is really, really going to hurt. This is going to be bad. I'm going to hit the wall. I'm going to be pinballing. I'm going to be rolling. All sorts of bad things are going to happen here. And so I was just kind of holding the wheel and thinking, okay, don't make big moves. Just try to be easy with it. Don't steer. Don't get caught. Nothing bad. And then when the thing does catch, don't dart off to one side or the other. And everyone was sure I was going to crash. And what happened was I just came out of it. And here's how much everybody knew that I was going to crash. Everybody, all of the teams, all of the crew chiefs, all of the helpers, all of the people, when I came out and didn't crash and made the first turn, everybody started applauding. And me too, because it was like God had reached down and said, guess what? Today, you're not going to crash. So he reached down and said, okay, I'm going to hold your car in all of this chaos, and you're just going to make it out, and then you're all going to be okay. So that was great. And I came back around, and my buddy Bernie Van Hammond came in and said, oh my God, I cannot believe. And everybody rushed over to the car. They were like, oh my God, we're so certain that you were going to crash and terrible things were going to happen. And that's so awesome that it didn't. So that was one of the things. The next thing is we were, the next big thing that really, this kind of scared me also, is that I was testing my Honda Civic. Now, this was a Bonneville Civic, so it went over 200 miles an hour. When we were running this test on a top secret Area 52 frontage road out past Vegas, we were running the car. The car went 211. And this first time we had put a parachute on the car. There was nobody else there. We were on a deserted road. I was going fast. We had lowered the car a little bit too much. And so what was happening is while I was going fast, the car was coming down and the tires were rubbing. And when they were rubbing, they weren't rubbing evenly on both sides. And it was making the car want to dart back and forth at 211 miles an hour. The bad thing is that while I was doing this, there was only one vehicle parked out on that road. And that was my buddy Bernie. And he was in the truck with the trailer that we had loaded the car up to bring it out there. And so I thought, this is great. I'm going this fast. The car's getting out of control. And never once, by the way, did it ever dawn on me that I needed to just pull the chute, because I had never pulled the parachute before this. We had just put it on. All the other times, I'm a road racer. I just steer out of it and fix the problem. And that's what I was trying to do. If I would have just pulled the chute, there would have been no problem. It would have steered itself. And later on, we did a parachute test. I'm like, that's kind of everything. There's no excitement there. So I thought, okay, this is great. I'm going really fast. The car's unstable. I'm definitely now going to crash. So I'm like trying to pick a spot where, okay, that's a big rock. I don't want to crash there. Those are big cactuses. I don't want to pick there. I'm definitely going to hit now the truck that's out in the middle, not in the middle, but out off to the side of the road where Bernie was. Bernie knows now that I'm going to hit the truck. He starts running out into the desert because he knows when I hit the truck, he doesn't want bad things hitting him. That's how certain he was that I was definitely going to crash, because that's how out of shape the car was. And like I said, should have just pulled the chute, and I never did that. I managed to gather the car back up, just missed the truck by like inches, kept going, slowed the car down, got everything settled. And he came out of the desert. He's like, oh my God, dude, what were you doing? I'm like, yeah, that was really close. I'm never doing this again. I'm never coming out here to test again in this car. This is really, really dumb. He's like, yeah, I was certain that you were definitely going to crash. And not only were you going to crash, but you were going to crash into the only truck that was on this road for like 5 or 6 miles. I'm like, yeah, I know. I couldn't believe that. So that was the only other 2 times. So whoever asked that question, those are the 2 times when big things could have really, really happened, but they didn't. All the other times, like I've crashed road racing. When I was running Bridgestone Supercar, I crashed at Laguna Seca, going up the hill, got 2 off on the road, tried to gather it up, didn't gather it up. The tire caught, and I slammed right into the inside wall like everybody does. And we destroyed the car and had to fix it and duct taped it and or I should say, plumbers taped it back together for the race. And that was not nearly as thrill-seeking and as exciting as either one of those events. So I hope that that's enough. So now nobody's even listening and everybody's talking about something else. Yeah, Merlin, the 500cc guys were making 200 horsepower, which is, you look at the horsepower per cubic inch or per cc, is pretty dang impressive. That's 400 horsepower per liter naturally aspirated. That's, I mean, with a two-stroke, obviously it's a little bit easier, but that's pretty impressive. The CRX of Death, that was cool. Yeah, Turbo Quad 4 would be good. I mean, they made crazy power back when Batten and Fueling did the Aerotech stuff with the Quad 4, and they pumped them up pretty far. Yeah, and the Big Bang motors they did for traction, because that was part of the problem, is that if they would get rid of some of the power pulses, they could actually put power down a little bit better exiting the turns. What kind of truck did you hit in the desert? It was a truck that we borrowed from somebody. I'm thinking that it was a Ford, because we didn't even have enough money to have our own truck. We had to borrow trucks and trailers from other people. Normally, when we would go to the race, like when we ran the Mustang at the Long Beach Grand Prix, I would go and rent a truck. We would disconnect the speedometer so that we wouldn't have to pay the mileage, and then we would borrow a trailer, or I would rent a tow dolly, and we would take our car with everybody else with their fancy enclosed trailers and all that stuff, and we would go to the race with a borrowed truck and a tow with the Mustang. And it was a little pathetic. I mean, here's how bad we had it back then. The Ferrari Challenge guys, which raced with us in the Bridgestone Supercar Series, came over and we were working on the Mustang. We were changing the rear end. It was cool because there was a bunch of guys from the crowd laying under the car with us. They're like, "Oh, dude, what are you guys doing? What are you changing? What are you doing this? What are you doing this?" Because they were like Mustang guys, and this was a regular kind of Mustang. They're all hanging out under this, but we were sitting there over, kind of Bernie and I were just by ourselves doing the thing, and the Ferrari guys came over and said, "Dude, are you guys hungry?" We're like, "Yeah, we haven't eaten like all day." They're like, "We have like catered stuff, so please go over and help yourself." So they felt so sorry for us because we were so low budget that they came over and offered us food, which was, if you guys are out there, that was fantastic of you. And we were so low budget that my younger brother came to one of the races, and we said, "Look, dude, there's some water or drinks over there, and we got some snacks or whatever." And he went over and opened the bag, and he pulled out, like, we had bought Pop-Tarts, except that they weren't Pop-Tarts. They were Toastums. He's like, "Dude, you can't even afford real Pop-Tarts." So that's how low buck we were. My own brother making fun of us. Omar, does a large displacement engine like cam duration more than a smaller displacement? The displacement tends to tame cam timing. So if you have a 224 cam in a 4.8, it's going to be a relatively bigger cam than that 224 cam will be in a 6-liter. Yes, and here's a little, Julius, here's a little inside information. If you guys are thinking about the Shelby GT500 blowers, you'll want to get them now. Yep. Richard, knock off Pop-Tarts. That's how we roll. Have you seen a 4BT with rotating cylinders so the piston rings never come to a stop where inefficiency are promising. I don't know what that is. So what form of four-wheel racing have you not been part of? I've never done any off-road racing. I think that that would be cool. I've only done some off-roading myself, but I've never been part of that. I've had guys offer me rides in trophy trucks, which I want to do because I love a truck that has 3 or 4 feet of suspension travel and can launch over things and land at, you know, 3-digit mile-an-hour levels, 110 or 120 or 130 miles an hour, and just land and keep going. I think that that's really kind of awesome. And we get to see a lot of that stuff at West Tech. A lot of the trophy guys come in and run their trucks there, and the guys from Dugan's do tuning there. And it's cool to see, you know, just how tough they have to make everything. Like if you look at all of the welding and the suspension and the tie rods that they use and the Heim joints and all that stuff, you're like, oh, wow, yeah, these guys are really serious about how bad they're beating on these things. It's really awesome stuff. And I really like all forms of stuff. Anything, like there are lots of drift guys come in, and I think that that's cool. That's not for me because the drifting stuff I think is more subjective. But again, I appreciate what they do, and I appreciate anytime somebody does something and does something well. And that's really kind of cool stuff. I mean, they're bouncing. I don't want to build a motor for one of these guys because they're bouncing them off a rev limiter all the time. And I don't like seeing that done to motors. It's kind of hard on them. But like I said, what they do is kind of awesome. We need some low compression, stupid boost pump gas. I don't like doing pump gas, high boost stuff. A 231, 238 with a 111. It's +4 though. So, but I would still check the piston to valve clearance on that. A 111 and a 231 is getting close enough to where I'd want to check it. Mallory Unilights, I haven't used one of those since I had my Camaro, but way back in the day, but it worked good. Tim wants to see a 7-to-1. Why don't you just go Porsche and go sub 7-to-1 and then weld the heads on and run it air cooled and then just run all the boost on it? The King of the Hammers would be cool. Chad actually invited me out to one of those. I think that would be interesting to go watch. What I would like to go, I would kind of like to go do either the drag week kind of thing or Rocky Mountain Raceway, that kind of thing, where you go to different events and drive the car. I think that that's kind of cool. Like when we were doing the Silver State, I always, our opinion, my friend Bernie and Jimmy and I, us guys that went out there together, what we thought a real car was a car that you could drive out. What we thought our definition of a street car was a car that you could drive out to the Silver State, race in the Silver State and have it last the whole race, and then drive back. Like that was a real car. I mean, any new Corvette obviously could do that, but ours were not that. I mean, I had a relatively new Mustang back then. It was an 88, and I think my first Silver State was in 89. So it was a relatively new car. So it definitely go do that. But they had 240Zs, which were cool, side draft Weber stuff, and they were certainly awesome, and I love those cars. As a matter of fact, I have one of those cars now. I have Jimmy's car, and it's certainly cool. But that was our definition. If you could drive out and run 1,000,000 miles an hour or whatever in the Silver State and drive it back, that's like a real car. Not a lot of guys could do that. And I like that about the drag week stuff where they're driving. They're obviously pushing the limit of that stuff. But I like being able to drive to the event and race in it and then drive back. That's kind of a cool deal. Oh, Jim, the diesel stuff, the cylinders, the sleeves actually spin. That's interesting. The Optima fastest streetcar deal is really cool, and I like that. And I'm a road racer at heart, so that would be more to my liking. But the level of cars that are at that stuff, the amount of money that goes into those cars, what they spend on their brakes is more than I can afford for the whole budget of a car. Yeah, they used to rent Hertz GT350s and then race them. And guys did that out the Silver State too. They would go to Vegas, they would rent Corvettes in Vegas and bring them out to the race. That's kind of cool. Team Shinoda, what's your hourly fee? I don't have one for consulting. Just call me or send me an email, and if you have questions, I'll obviously answer them if I can. A daily driver for the Nova, I would like to put the 3800. I would like to do a compound in the 3800, so I'd like to have the blower 3800 with a turbo going into that. I'd also like to have the 4200 in that. I mean, any inline six-cylinder. I think the Ford 300 in that would be cool, and I also think that either a 4-liter Jeep would also be cool, or the K24 I think would be fun in that thing. I don't know what the minimum, Julius. I don't know what the minimum is on drag week. I don't know how slow they go. That's a cool thing about the Silver State is that when we went there, the first few years I went there, you just bring whatever you have and run it. And they like at the first race, they came up to you and said, how fast do you think your car is going to go? And you tell them, I think it's going to go 142 miles an hour. And a lot of guys way overestimated their cars. Like one guy in a Volkswagen Rabbit said, my car's going to go 151 miles an hour. I'm like, dude, it's not turbocharged. It's a naturally aspirated 8-valve GTI. It's not going to go that fast. Well, his car went 128 or whatever. It didn't go that fast. So some guys overestimated, some guys underestimated. They were sandbagging. They thought that they were street racing or whatever. I'm like, dude, this isn't that. This is to stop people from passing you. So I told people, look, my Mustang is going to go 146 miles an hour. I already know because I had already tested this. And that's how fast it went. And they're like, it's not going to go that fast. So they put behind a bunch of guys. Like they put me behind the Rabbit guy. They put me behind a 57 Corvette. They put me behind a bunch of guys. So I passed 7 guys during the race. And they didn't want a bunch of passing going on because they wanted it to be safe in these early races. So my car averaged 147 miles an hour. So I knew how fast it would go. And then after that, a few years later, they started doing the classes. So you could run, the idea was to, like if you were in the 100-mile-an-hour class, you would try to average exactly 100 miles an hour. So guys were bringing out these Helder rally clocks and stuff and trying to get exactly like, because they were measuring the average speed during a 92-mile race to the 3rd decimal using stopwatches. So I told the guys, look, that's not really possible. The guy can click it or not click it, and it's not going to be 3 decibels. So so they have 100-mile-an-hour classes, 110, 120, 130, all the way up to unlimited stuff. So you go in a class where you think you're going to be competitive. If you have a 145-mile-an-hour car, you're in a class that's between 140 and 150 miles an hour, and then you would do that. So I kind of like that, and I like that race. I like running flat out at that stuff. When we first did it the first couple of years, they had Cessna highway patrol planes driving on the side of the road. So it was really cool to be able to outrun a highway patrol plane going down this 12-mile straightaway where you could go as fast as the car would go, obviously. So that, you know, just if you were a car guy, that had a good inner feeling trying to outrun the highway patrol. Yeah, it was a lot of passing in an open road race, and we did a fair amount in most of the races, just because some guys were fast and some guys were not that fast, and a lot of guys would go fast on the straightaway and then go slow in the turns. Yeah, Tim, I agree. If this goes well with the Atlas 4200, I may try the 5-cylinder and the 4-cylinder if it's an easy hookup, because I just, because they're there, and if we can hook them up, I think it would be awesome. And I have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Yes, a 4-banger Nova and a 5-banger and a 4-banger Nova. I've actually done testing with the 5-cylinder with my buddy James back in the Vector days, and he put a not a ProCharger, a Powerdyne Supercharger on a 5-cylinder. It was probably a Colorado back then. So I like those motors, and I think that they're cool, and I like the fact that they're kind of the modular progression. And if I can run a 6-cylinder, why not run a 4 and a 5? Yeah, Mike, the Mustang eventually with the blower on it went with the R trim on it, it went almost 200. It went 197. With the B trim on it, it went 177 or 178 miles an hour. Yeah, Tim, all the Alice motors share the bell housing. I just don't know if the harness that we have will work on all of them. Corbo, I don't know about Chris Straub cams. I don't think I've ever tried one. And JV, I do like the Ford Duratec engines. We did a lot of stuff with those back in the show shop days. They would take the SVT Contour stuff and put the 3-liter show motor, and put the top end stuff from the SHO or from the Contour motor on the 3-liter. They'd make a stroker, basically SVT Contour in there. It was pretty cool. Blaine, do I have any pictures of the Mustang? I think I have some old ones from the Silver State days. Because one of the guys that came out there actually made us photos, and he made us a mug with our photo in the mug. You know, he was really high digit. They had Audi Quattros, and when they first came, it was the Badors, I think was their last name. The first year they came with a Testarossa, a 959, and the other one might have been a Boxer, maybe. But then they came with Audi Quattros and you know, all kinds of crazy stuff. They had lots of money. They were good drivers, and they knew what they were doing. And I raced with them up at the Virginia City Hill Climb, so they knew how to get around. They were pretty cool. Chad, I don't know if what the Holly can do on the odd cylinder stuff. I never found anything to run my inline 3-cylinder Chevy Sprint motor. So I want to do that too. Yes, Bill, and the Big Red Camaro. He was there. I was there when Big Red ran the first year. RJ Gottlieb, and that car was really nice. I actually met them down at the La Carrera race that we were down. We took a 77 Camaro. We borrowed it from my brother, and ran that down there. And they were down there with Big Red. As a matter of fact, we offered to give them, they didn't have a place to stay because they got down there late. We said, look, you guys can stay at our place. They ended up staying up all night working on the car, so they never did. But we said, look, you guys are racers. We love your car. That's an awesome car. We know that it's famous. Just if you guys need a place to sleep, just sleep in there, because that's what I think racers should do. Aaron sending me an email on the 2.2 information. Very cool. Thank you, guys. I'm going to get going. I'm going to go see Lisa. It's the weekend. Maybe we'll watch TV. I got to load my video up first. So you guys make sure, if you're here, make sure to watch the video that I'm going to post on the road trip that I took down to get the motors. And then make sure tomorrow night at 5 o'clock in California or 7 o'clock on the East Coast, watch Uncle Tony, go to Uncle Tony's garage, and I will be live with Uncle Tony talking about Mopar stuff. Very cool. Thanks, guys.